All right, Donald Trump's election victory caused a lot of people to think that the war between Russia and Ukraine would still come to an end as the United States pulled back on its financial and military support for Ukraine, something that former President Trump promised repeatedly throughout the campaign. However, what was expected to be a quiet transition in America's proxy war has heated up dramatically after President Biden reversed himself in order to allow Ukraine to fire U.S.-made and U.S.-operated ATACMS missiles up to 200 miles into the Russian Federation, which they've now done. As Russian President Vladimir Putin had threatened to do, Russia quickly responded by updating its nuclear doctrine in order to authorize Russian military leaders to launch a nuclear strike against any nuclear-armed country that attacks Russia, whether it uses nuclear or conventional weapons. Now that has occurred. Ukraine used an ATACMS to attack Russia. And of course, there's also this landmine thing. And of course, there's this possible threat against the U.S. Embassy in Kyiv or Kiev, depending on how you want to pronounce it. Will Russia let it go, retaliate asymmetrically, or go to DEFCON 4, or whatever the equivalent is what they have in Russia? Can Putin wait things out until January 20th when Trump comes into office? And if he does, will it pay off with a long-term settlement? How close are we to World War III? We are joined by Mark Slaboda. He's a military and international relations and security analyst and an expert on the war between Russia and Ukraine to game out what comes next. You can follow Mark on Twitter at Mark Slaboda1, on his YouTube channel at The Real Politic with Mark Slaboda, and find him on Facebook at facebook.com/Gramsci. That's GRAMSCI. Mark, thanks for joining us here on the TMI Show.
Ted, Manila, thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the show. And Ted, I'm going to leave the assertion that Betty White was attractive in your corner. There. And her character's name on Golden Girls was Rose.
I was talking about the Mary Tyler Moore show, though.
Oh,
she was Phyllis.
Way back.
Mary Tyler Moore show is at least, I don't know. It's. I feel old at 50, but you're obviously.
I'm 61.
Taking it way back.
Yeah, a decade older, a different generation.
Yeah.
Taking it way back. But I think most of the younger generation, by the way, they're seeing a resurgence in viewership in the Golden Girls. Just so you know, it's a thing. Like on Netflix.
They should watch Mary Tyler Moore show instead. Something. It's a better show.
I don't even know what the Mary Tyler Moore show is.
Oh, it's absolutely iconic. I mean, Mary Tyler Moore plays a young local TV producer in Minneapolis. She's a single woman trying to make it in the big city, and this show launched a lot of careers. Notably, Ed Asner. He took off there, and what's his name? The guy who played the news anchor, Ted Baxter. What was that guy's name? With the white hair.
I can see his face. I can't think of the names. But yeah, it did launch a lot of careers. So there's that.
Oh, by the way, I've reassessed my best 80s cartoon, and I have to withdraw the Thundercats and put forward Thundar the Barbarian.
I don't know about Thundar.
I don't know.
But absolutely incredible 80s sci-fi apocalyptic cartoon from the 80s.
Thundar. All right, I'm going to check that out.
I don't know
YouTube.
that one. I did love Land of the Lost.
Well, that's much older than the 80s.
Yeah, that I am aware, but it wasn't really a cartoon, though, was it?
No.
Yeah, are we doing only okay, I need to think of cartoons that I like. No. Okay. But in not so cartoonish world, in reality world, here we are.
Still pretty cartoonish.
Well, you can still go. I mean, technically, The Simpsons is an '80s show, isn't it? Or not? No,
yes,
it's not.
yeah, no.
With the Tracy, maybe with the Tracy Ullman stuff.
Tracy Ullman, it was. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, but anyhow, yeah. Well, The Simpsons they predict everything. I don't know if they predicted this one. I don't know.
What we're talking about today.
An aficionado, yeah. With they predicted a lot of stuff, with the whole Kamala Harris female president thing. I guess that was applicable to Hillary Clinton.
President Trump. They predicted that.
They predicted that. I don't know if anyone saw this Ukraine thing coming. You really? Well, here we are. He's that guy. I never thought, Mark, I would be praying, like, I can't wait for Donald Trump to get into office after waking up this morning and finding out that Joe Biden, no idea. I mean, it can't be worse than this. The Biden administration not only greenlights ATACMS yesterday, but now the UK is sending, now the landmines, and now the UK is allowing usage of the Storm Shadow cruise missiles. So I feel like the West really, really, really extra wants to F things up before Trump gets into office, and maybe get that World War III going, so that way Donald Trump is left with having to deal with cleaning up the crap. I kind of feel like that's part of it.
Okay, so let me while this is being portrayed in the West as Biden allows or greenlights Kiev's use of the ATACMS missiles deeper into Russia. First of all, these missiles have already been used on Russian targets for a year, right? Now, they've been used in the Donbass, Kherson, Zaporozhye, Crimea, and I know the West doesn't consider them to be part of Russia. Speaking as someone with a Crimean wife and family in the Crimea,
True.
I beg to differ, but there's an understanding of that. But let's be clear, because Putin was very specific a few months ago when this topic was last raised, and the White House backed away from it at the time. This is a U.S. ballistic missile that has to be guided to target by U.S. GPS active satellites, and the targeting sequence for firing actually has to be programmed into the individual missile by U.S. military specialists. Because like with the British Storm Shadows and the French Scalps, it uses a proprietary classified coding software that there's no way that the U.S. would transfer to the Kiev regime because of the potential leak and the compromising of an entire weapon system that way. And we know this because no less a person than the German Chancellor, Olaf Scholz, publicly said as much when defending his decision not to send German Taurus cruise missiles, because he wouldn't put German troops on the ground launching missiles at Russians, right? He specifically, like the British, the French, and the Americans are doing. He specifically said that. So Putin has been clear. This isn't a matter of giving permission to the Kiev regime to now launch missiles deep into Russia proper, if you will. This is Joe Biden firing ballistic missiles into Russia. That's the Russian perspective. Right. That's the way they see this. They see this as an act of war by the United States on the Russian Federation. Not a proxy, no fig leaf, an act of war by Joe Biden against Russia. Now, the question is, how will Russia respond? Previously, when the last time this possibility was pushed, CNN came out with a story saying that the U.S. talked Russia out of supplying long-range anti-ship missiles to the Houthis in Yemen. The Houthis, the Ansala movement, that has been conducting a blockade against Israeli and Israeli allied, meaning Western shipping, in the Red Sea now, over the ongoing Israeli genocide of Palestinians. They've conducted multiple attacks with cruise missiles, ballistic missiles, drones on U.S. and Western warships in the Red Sea. And if Russia provided far more long-range, accurate, and powerful anti-ship missiles, you can pretty much guess they'd be in a hurry to use it. Now, supposedly, this was backed down, presumably because Biden at the time refrained from conducting these attacks in Russia. I think you can be pretty certain that Russia is definitely reconsidering going through with that, in which case it will be young U.S. sailors and Marines who pay the price for Biden's attacks on Russia. That said, Russia has to weigh the precedent and the deterrence here of the senile warmonger exiting the stage when Trump, with at least the potential that if not bringing an end to the conflict, will at least de-escalate the U.S. role in it in less than 2 months. So there's a lot for the Kremlin to consider here, a lot of precedent, issues of deterrence. What will the Trump administration do? Will they just continue this, or will they change policy? Will they revoke, these type of attacks? And what is done in the meantime? We've already seen 6 missiles launched, 6 of these ATACMS into Russia. Now, contrary to the New York Times story, which claimed they would just be used in a narrow range of territory in the Kursk region, supposedly to hit of Russia, where those invisible North Korean super soldiers that no one has found any evidence of, this Red Dawn fan fiction, that was the excuse. But they weren't used in the Kursk region at all. They were fired into the Bryansk region at an old Soviet ammunition depot that wasn't even being used in this conflict. And according to the Russian Ministry of Defense, 5 of those missiles were shot down, a 6th was hit and crashed, causing a fire, but not actually hitting the base in question. So all of them failing to hit the target. And according to the Financial Times, the Kiev regime has no more than 50 of those. So at least that leaves us with no more than 44 for hitting nothing. And that is, is it something that Russia will factor in? These weapons have already been used against Russian targets for a year. And Russia has long developed a profile for their electronic warfare and air defense systems, the best in the world, by the way. And they have demonstrated the capability to physically bring these things down with air defense and to block their GPS signals with their electronic warfare, rendering them useless hunks of metal floating through the sky, unable to connect to their target. So this isn't some type of game changer. The Pentagon did not want to do this. They were against this because they said that this will not change anything on the battlefield. There's nothing that the Kiev regime can hit with as many as we can afford to give. And the Pentagon doesn't want to give any more of these missiles because they are not currently producing any more of them. And they're very, very worried about a potential conflict that the U.S. intends to provoke with China in the Taiwan Straits and the South China Sea in the very near future, because they are constantly harping about a missile gap, a conventional missile gap that they're afraid will give China an advantage. And I think we're already well past that point of the U.S. being able to win that conflict. But I guess they still have hopes in that category, which is why Biden is having to pry these ATACMS out of the Pentagon's hands. And supposedly now they've got less than 50 left. For what? So you could stage a big explosion at an ammo depot that wasn't even an old ammo depot that wasn't even being used in this conflict, i.e. an info warfare hit that didn't even work. And that's why we are now on the, Putin's not going to fire nuclear missiles into Russia, right? That's
into Ukraine.
Or into Ukraine, right? Russia's not going to fire nuclear missiles into the U.S. or into Ukraine, right? That's absurd. That's not what's going to happen.
So what about this potential embassy attack?
Right. They keep saying air attack on high alert, whatever. The U.S. embassy is shut down, immediate effect.
I have to assume that's disinformation. Russia also is not going to attack an embassy. That is not in Russia's MO whatsoever. They've always been very against such measures. Russia will attack with a military response to a military attack if they choose to respond at all. And I'm not so sure they will, because while there is the question of red lines and deterrence, it's quite obvious that Joe Biden is laying a trap here, right? And I think Putin will weigh everything in and will reserve the right to conduct a response to this into the future, depending on what the Trump administration does or does not do once inaugurated. But I think Putin is a little too, I don't know, not senile, compared to Biden, that he won't walk into. I mean, the trap is really for Trump, not for Putin. But
are there, speaking of which, are there back channel communications or even normal communications between President-elect Trump and President Putin, where basically Trump is saying, "Look, this isn't me. Hold tight. The cavalry's on the way. I'm sorry. Like my predecessors are being a little cray cray."
Yeah, according to the Russian side, there's been no contact whatsoever. But I would suggest that there is a way, if you have close Trump confidants like Donald Trump Jr. or Richard Grenville speaking, presenting, what we can assume, or we at least hope, is Trump's disapproval of this. Right? Trump isn't leaping into it himself, which is the smart thing to do politically, right? But if his interlocutors are speaking out, Russia is, of course, listening, and we can presume that that's some type of indirect message to Russia, hopefully.
Do you foresee any chance of this warfare going into the water, as like maybe in the Black Sea somewhere? Do you see this escalation going that way at all?
The Black Sea is not actually very good territory for the U.S. because they are not a littoral state of the Black Sea. So they are restricted by the admission of warships into the Black Sea by the Montreux Convention that Turkey, as the state controlling the Dardanelles Straits, is bound by. So the U.S. could only send one warship into the Black Sea at a time, and they can't send any aircraft carriers. So the Black Sea is not a good area for such confrontation. But Russia does have a naval base in Syria now. They've got naval bases there. The U.S. has military and naval and air bases all over the Middle East. There's plenty of room in the Middle East for this conflict to expand into. We've already seen it expand into Africa.
Well, Mark, we got a viewer question for you. I'm going to throw at you from Adrian. Adrian asks, does Mark really think there'll be a formal Russia-U.S. negotiation? Also, can Russia take the chance to leave even a rump Ukraine state?
Okay, Adrian. So certainly there won't be any Biden Russia, right? That was never in the cards. Do I think there will be a Russia a U.S. negotiations? No, I don't. I think Donald Trump will present his deal, which is basically an attempt to push the Kiev regime and Russia into an agreement that he brokers as if he was a third party, which as U.S. president, he won't be. He will be a party to this conflict. But I don't think there will be any intention of direct negotiations between the U.S. and Russia. I think that that's not in the cards. The U.S. still has their pretense of not being a party to this conflict.
Oh, correction. Ukraine. I read that wrong.
Sorry, what about China? I mean, China's played a role in recent years as a broker in conflicts. Could President Xi offer himself as a credible third-party broker?
He has. He has previously offered. He's presented his own Chinese peace deal. And Zelensky has had some very nasty and disrespectful things to say about him in China. So I don't think that's really an option. To be perfectly honest, I don't believe that the Zelensky regime in Kiev is even ideologically or emotionally, mentally capable of engaging in negotiations. I think with Russia, I think they will go down to the end. I think unless they are removed internally or, by U.S. connivance, I don't believe that his own people have told Simon Schuster of Time Magazine already last year that he is delusional, and you can't tell him that they're not doing well in this conflict.
But the U.S. would never interfere in the internal affairs of Ukraine and consider changing its president.
Yeah, sure.
Well, he's already not president, Mark. I think we forget. Technically, his term ended in May, so Zelensky is like, I don't know, little dictator in chief there until TBD.
As far as Russia is concerned,
Speaker of the
every
House.
leader of the Kiev regime since the 2014 U.S.-backed putsch is illegitimate, right? They have banned every political party representing the people of East Ukraine in the country, some 20 political parties. Every leftist party in the country has been banned, right? They've gone after the Russian language. They've gone after the Ukrainian Orthodox Church.
Mark, we lost your video for some reason. But we can hear you
there. But they haven't. I don't think that they're capable of conducting any negotiations.
So I guess that brings us to the other half of Adrian's question, right? Which is, if that's the case, if they decide that they're, like Nazi Germany, going down to the bunker, could Russia find itself in a position of having to press forward and go all the way to the border with Poland and either take over, overthrow the Zelensky government and install someone more amenable, or or occupy Ukraine? What happens then? Or do we just continue with years of grinding slog?
Yeah, it's certainly a possibility, and a lot of it will depend, of course, on what Trump does or doesn't do. But I think that there is growing feeling within the Kremlin. We've heard it voiced from people like, Medvedev, who has become the new Zhirinovsky, the new hawk, or blowhard, depending on your take. But we've also heard it from Lavrov and others that they believe that this only ends with regime change in Kiev. And I have to say that I agree with that as well. Now, there will be multiple crux points where both Russia and the West will have to reassess and consider whether it requires further escalation, i.e. NATO boots on the ground. When Russia fully liberates the Donbass sometime next summer, most likely. When Russia fully liberates Kherson and Zaporozhye as well, right? Perhaps a year after that. When Russia reaches the Dnieper, at each one of those points, there will be a push by neocons in both the U.S. and in Europe, within the Trump administration and without it, that they need to defend Kiev, right? That will be the question. So, but the alternative is to leave a regime in Kiev that is ideologically, disposed towards total and eternal conflict with Russia along the lines of some kind of Banderite fascist West Ukrainian ultra-nationalists, identity and face that being armed, even if at a lesser degree or a guerrilla war, by the West going forward into the future. At that point, rather than have it be a battle platform, it's probably to Russia's benefit to just occupy it, which will lead to a guerrilla war in its own accord. And I was against myself 3 years ago, but we're in a different place now than we were 3 years ago.
Mark, what about internal divisions within Ukraine? I mean, but Zelensky, there were opposition parties before he came along. Zelensky was really unpopular. His approval rating was in the teens before the conflict began. So, I mean, obviously there are people who are chafing at the bit within Ukraine who don't like Zelensky, many of whom probably want to, some of whom probably want to make peace with Russia. Is there any chance that there will be an uprising internally within Ukraine, either as a palace coup or as a revolution that would overthrow him?
Okay, so the only alternative for that is another figure within the Maidan regime, right? Mm-hmm. Whether we're talking the candy oligarch Poroshenko, who preceded Zelensky, or Zaluzhny, who himself is a raving Banderite fascist with 2 busts of Stepan Bandera in his room because one of them is not enough, right? I don't see where either of those would be an improvement on Zelensky. In fact, they would probably be worse. And there simply are no further political figures in Ukraine, right? All other political parties outside of the Maidan parties have been banned, right? Their leaders have been persecuted. They've been driven out of the country. They've been attempted to assassinate
so there's no underground.
Another opposition leader in Spain.
There's no underground. There's no Operation Valkyrie possible here.
There is a very light underground that is, for instance, burning the conscription cars at night in the Odessa area and elsewhere. But for all intents and purposes, what has happened in the last, since 2014, is that the security and military have been filled with Banderites, right? And Kirill Budanov, as the Kiev regime's military intelligence chief, is the perfect example of this. There is no indication that there would be anything else from these people. In fact, they've given every indication that if Zelensky dared actually go to negotiations, that they would kill him, right? And take control of the country themselves. So without any type of dissent from the security services, from the military, right, from these institutions of power, then there's really no possibility of any uprising. Because if anyone comes out to protest or stage an insurrection or move, they simply get packed off to the front. And that's been the pattern for months now.
It sounds like on Ukraine's side that no matter which way they cut it, whether it's with Zelensky or whoever, I mean, I don't know who else there would be, because as you outlined, there is no opposition to him. But it doesn't sound like there's any peace even being considered from the Ukrainian side. Do you think there's actually any peace being considered on the Russian side, or does the peace not matter, that Vladimir Putin is dead set on the goals outlined by the special military operation? So it just, Washington be damned, doesn't matter who's here. They're just going to keep forging on.
Yeah, I don't think either one of them really is interested in any deal or any peace at all. Both sides, the Kiev regime and Russia, are fully still, without any degree of remove, committed to their maximalist goals, right? The Kiev regime getting all of their territory back, sending Russian leadership to war crimes trials, reparations, all of this Zelensky peace formula fantasy. On the Russian side, the goals of the SMO, which have been clearly laid out, but they're still quite a way from achieving all of them, which includes the demilitarization and the denazification or debanderization of Ukraine, as well as the full liberation of the Donbass, Kherson, and Zaporozhye. That's quite a ways away. The difference, of course, is that Russia is winning and has the ability to achieve their maximalist goals. And I don't think that there's any sentiment in Russia for anything less than a total victory at this point. They feel that they've sacrificed this much. The common sentiment is they want to remove this. They don't want to have to fight this war again in 4 years or 8 years or 10 years.
Right.
Both sides are saying no more Minsk, right? Both sides are saying that. And I don't think there's any U.S. dictated deal of Trump's that is going to change. Russia has been clear. There will be no freezing of this conflict. Right?
What will be the effect? What do you think is likely? What do you think Trump is actually likely to do vis-a-vis Ukraine? And what effect will that have?
Yeah, he'll present a deal that probably isn't too different from the deals, from the plans that have been put forward by Pompeo and others, right? Calling for a freeze of the conflict, perhaps calling on Kiev to accept, at least temporarily, Russian occupation of some of the territory they claim as their own, and so forth, conditions that will be agreed on by neither side. And so when Putin says "niet" to Trump, right? You're the losing side of this conflict. You're not a third party. You're part of this conflict, and you're losing, and we're winning. Why should we agree to your terms? No. Then Trump is left with two options, right? First of all, Zelensky's also likely to say no, but let's leave that to the side for the moment. So Trump can either walk away, cut off all aid to Ukraine, and say, well, I did what I could. I guess Russia will just take it all. Right? I don't see that as a realistic possibility. I don't think that Trump can do that as the U.S. president. I don't think he has the power over the blob, over the foreign policy.
You don't think this time is different? I mean, these cabinet appointees tend to signal a far more confident Donald Trump than the first time around.
There's an awful lot of neocons in that cabinet.
Mm-hmm.
And what they will be telling Trump is, Putin said no to you. How dare he? We need to project strength.
Right.
You're going to have to escalate to de-escalate.
Right. That's what they always say.
That is what they always say. I don't think Trump has the capability to do this. How many assassination attempts have there been on him so far?
But
he tries to go against.
There's also the counterfactual that he might be 78 years old, lame duck president, looking towards his legacy and giving no shits.
Yeah, we can hope, right?
That's the hope.
That's the hope, right? I've seen no reason to believe that from his previous administration, from the course of the U.S. so far,
or the picks in his administration.
If we want to hope, let's hope. But I don't do hope. I don't.
Well, he's in a different place, and he seems
Mark
to be
is the hope dasher.
I can't agree.
I know he's a hope killer.
Mark Rubio and Mike Waltz and Peter Hegseth does not tell me that Trump is in a different place. It does not. Fair
enough.
Yeah, but sadly, Mark, like I said at the top, I said that the alternative, the Biden side, the Biden party, whatever, if they want to call themselves Democrats or whatever, they seem to be worse. And I really, really hate them for making me root for Trump right now, because that's the only hope we have, because the evidence I do have from the Biden administration is escalation, escalation, escalation on your way out in the 11th hour. So
I can't argue with that. I just don't drink Coke or Pepsi.
All right, Mark, we lost your video a while ago. We see your logo up there. Tell us again where people can still find you if they can. If your YouTube channel is back, tell us.
No one
all
can
that
find
stuff.
me. Only you. No, you can find me at Mark Slaboda 1 at Twitter X. You can also find me on Telegram and Substack at The Real Politique with Mark Slaboda.
That'll
All
do
right,
it.
Mark. Let
You're the
let
best.
me de-introduce him. Well, we can't de-escalate, but we can de-introduce Mark Slaboda, the voice you just heard. But the face that you lost about 5 minutes ago is an international relations and security analyst. Follow Mark on Twitter, now called X, at Mark Slaboda 1, on his YouTube channel at The Real Politique with Mark Slaboda, and get him on Facebook at facebook.com/Gramsci, GRAMSCI. Mark, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Mark.